Focus on yourself in 2026. As we step into 2026, let me say something that might sound uncomfortable at first, but stay with me. This year is not about proving anything to anyone. It's not about competing. It's not about clapping back. It's not about trying to be seen, validated, or applauded. 2026 is about focus. And that focus starts with you. Too many people are exhausted not because life is hard, but because their attention is scattered. You're watching what everyone else is doing. You're measuring your progress against somebody else's timeline. You're carrying opinions that were never assigned to you, fights that were never yours, and expectations that don't even align with who you're becoming. Growth does not begin with new opportunities, new connections, or new environments. It begins with attention. Most people are not stuck because they lack ability. They are stuck because their focus is divided. Energy is being wasted on monitoring lives they were never called to live, timelines they were never assigned to follow, and opinions that were never meant to shape their decisions. When attention is scattered, progress slows. When focus is reclaimed, clarity returns. Every day, attention is being pulled in 100 directions. Notifications, comparisons, expectations, distractions disguised as responsibilities. Without realizing it, people surrender their most valuable resource to things that cannot produce the future they desire. Focus is not just about concentration. It is about intentional alignment. What you repeatedly give your attention to will eventually define your priorities, your patterns, and your outcomes. Reclaiming focus requires the courage to disconnect from what drains you and recommit to what develops you. This means recognizing that not everything deserves a response, and not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, emotions, or energy. Some distractions are loud, but others are subtle. Harmless scrolling, unnecessary conversations, a constant observation of what others are doing instead of investing in what you are becoming. Over time, these small leaks in attention create massive delays in growth. Focus demands boundaries. Without boundaries, attention is constantly hijacked by urgency rather than guided by purpose. When everything feels important, nothing truly is. Learning to prioritize is an act of discipline, not convenience. It requires choosing depth over noise and direction over reaction. Focus is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters with consistency and clarity. When focus is reclaimed, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring progress against someone else's highlight reel and begin evaluating it against your own growth. This shift restores confidence because confidence is built through alignment, not applause. When you are focused, you are less reactive, less defensive, and less distracted by validation. Your energy is no longer spent proving yourself, it is invested in building yourself. Focus also sharpens decision-making. When attention is clear, choices become simpler. You can discern what aligns with your purpose and what merely appeals to your emotions. Distractions often masquerade as opportunities, but focus exposes them for what they are: detours that delay momentum. Growth accelerates when decisions are filtered through intention instead of impulse. Reclaiming focus is not a one-time decision, it is a daily practice. Each day presents a choice between attention that drifts and attention that is directed. The future is shaped not by what you intend to do someday, but by what you consistently focus on today. When attention is disciplined, growth becomes inevitable. Personal responsibility is the moment growth becomes unavoidable. Progress does not begin when circumstances change, it begins when ownership is accepted. Too often, energy is spent explaining why things are the way they are instead of confronting what must change. Blame may feel justified, but it delays transformation. Responsibility, though uncomfortable, creates momentum. Taking ownership means recognizing that habits shape outcomes. What you repeatedly do, especially when no one is watching, determines the direction of your life. Results are rarely accidental. They are the accumulation of daily choices. If the outcome is undesirable, the most honest question is not, who failed me? But what patterns am I participating in that sustain this reality? Responsibility requires that question to be asked without defensiveness or denial. Healing also demands responsibility. Past wounds may not have been chosen, but unaddressed pain will continue to influence present decisions. Avoidance does not erase damage, it amplifies it. Growth requires the humility to confront what has been ignored and the discipline to do the internal work others may never see. Responsibility means refusing to let yesterday's trauma dictate tomorrow's behavior. Ownership extends to discipline. Consistency is not about convenience, it is about commitment. Waiting for ideal conditions to act is a subtle form of avoidance. Responsible people move forward even when motivation is absent, energy is low, or progress feels slow. They understand that obedience to process produces results long before feelings catch up. Responsibility also requires honesty. Self-deception is often the greatest barrier to growth. Excuses sound reasonable, but they create comfort without change. Ownership strips away justifications and replaces them with clarity. It acknowledges limitations without surrendering to them. It admits mistakes without living in shame. Growth happens when truth is faced directly and acted upon consistently. Accountability is not punishment, it is alignment. When responsibility is embraced, control is restored. You stop waiting for permission, validation, or rescue. Instead, you begin responding with intention. Life may still present obstacles, but responsibility determines whether those obstacles become excuses or lessons. The difference between stagnation and progress is often found in the willingness to own what can be changed. Taking responsibility also reshapes expectations. Instead of demanding outcomes without preparation, effort aligns with desire. Instead of expecting others to compensate for lack of discipline, personal standards are raised. Responsibility shifts the focus from what should happen to what must be done. This shift transforms frustration into action and potential into progress. Growth accelerates when ownership becomes habitual. Responsibility clarifies priorities, strengthens resolve, and produces resilience. When excuses are released, capacity expands. The moment responsibility is accepted, the future stops being something hoped for and becomes something built. Discipline is the quiet force that carries growth when emotion no longer can. Motivation is powerful, but it is unstable. It rises with excitement and fades with resistance. Discipline, however, remains steady regardless of mood, circumstance, or external affirmation. Those who rely solely on motivation will always start strong and finish weak, but those who build discipline develop endurance. Discipline is not about intensity, it is about consistency. Small actions repeated daily will outperform occasional bursts of effort every time. Many people overestimate what they can do in a moment of excitement and underestimate what steady discipline can produce over time. Growth does not require dramatic change. It requires faithful execution of simple practices. The power is not in the complexity of the plan, but in the consistency of the practice. Motivation responds to feelings, but discipline responds to commitment. Feelings fluctuate based on energy, stress, and circumstance. Discipline operates on decision. It says, this matters enough to do even when it is inconvenient. When discipline is present, progress continues even on unproductive days. When it is absent, momentum collapses the moment resistance appears. Discipline also protects focus. Without it, distractions dictate direction. Comfort becomes a priority and growth becomes optional. Discipline establishes structure and structure creates freedom. When habits are intentional, energy is conserved and decision fatigue is reduced. You no longer negotiate with yourself about whether to act. Action becomes automatic. There is a cost to discipline, but there is also a cost to its absence. Discipline requires sacrifice in the present, but undisciplined living demands payment in the future. The discomfort of consistency is temporary. The regret of neglect is lasting. Those who choose discipline understand that inconvenience is a small price to pay for long-term stability and progress. Discipline is not punishment, it is self-respect in action. It communicates that your goals deserve effort, your time deserves intention, and your future deserves preparation. Each disciplined choice reinforces identity. Over time, a discipline stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural because it becomes part of who you are, not just what you do. Sustainable success is never built on emotion alone. It is built on routines that function even when passion fades. Discipline bridges the gap between intention and outcome. It transforms potential into progress and desire into results. When motivation disappears, as it inevitably will, discipline remains, carrying growth forward without negotiation. The condition of the mind determines the direction of the life. What occupies your thoughts eventually shapes your decisions, and your decisions shape your future. Every thought allowed to linger carries influence, whether acknowledged or not. The mind is not neutral territory. It is constantly being formed by what it consumes. Without intentional guarding, it becomes vulnerable to ideas, narratives, and distractions that quietly redirect purpose. What you expose your mind to will train it. Repeated inputs create internal agreements, beliefs about identity, worth, possibility, and limitation. Over time, these beliefs operate automatically, influencing behavior without conscious awareness. This is why guarding the mind is not about restriction for restriction's sake. It is about protecting alignment. Not everything that is accessible is beneficial, and not everything that is entertaining is harmless. Character is formed in the unseen spaces long before it is revealed in visible moments. Private decisions shape public outcomes. Integrity is not proven by what is displayed, but by what is practiced when no one is present to applaud or correct. The consistency between private behavior and public identity determines credibility. When the two are misaligned, instability follows. Guarding the mind also requires discernment in relationships and environments. Conversations influence perspective. Environments shape behavior. Remaining in spaces that normalize compromise will slowly erode conviction. What is tolerated repeatedly will eventually be justified. Growth demands the courage to remove yourself from influences that weaken clarity, even when doing so feels uncomfortable or misunderstood. Character is not built through intention alone, but through repeated choices that align with values. Every decision either strengthens or weakens internal structure. Small compromises rarely appear dangerous, but they accumulate. What is dismissed as insignificant today often becomes the source of regret tomorrow. Guarding character means recognizing that consistency matters even in moments that seem inconsequential. The mind must be actively renewed, not passively protected. This requires replacing unproductive patterns with disciplined reflection, learning, and truth. Without renewal, old narratives resurface, especially under pressure. Stress does not create character, it reveals it. What remains under pressure is what has been practiced consistently. Guarding the mind and character is an act of leadership over self. It communicates intentionality, self-awareness, and responsibility. When the inner life is aligned, external challenges lose their power to destabilize. Clarity increases, decisions sharpen, and confidence becomes rooted rather than reactive. A guarded mind and anchored character create stability that circumstances cannot easily disrupt. Approval is a powerful motivator, but it is also a subtle trap. When decisions are driven by the desire to be accepted, direction becomes compromised. Alignment, on the other hand, requires clarity about purpose and the courage to honor it. Choosing alignment over approval means deciding that faithfulness to what you are becoming matters more than being liked for who you pretend to be. Many people remain stuck, not because they lack opportunity, but because they fear the discomfort of disappointing others. Approval often demands performance, adjustment, and silence. Alignment demands honesty. When growth begins, tension often follows, not because something is wrong, but because priorities have shifted. Not everyone will understand the changes you make, and that misunderstanding is often the cost of progress. Alignment requires saying no without explanation. Boundaries are not rejection, they are protection. When boundaries are absent, access is unlimited and focus is diluted. Some people benefit from your availability, but not from your growth. Choosing alignment means recognizing that proximity does not always equal purpose. Not every relationship is designed to evolve with you, and forcing it to so only creates frustration. As alignment sharpens, certain conversations will feel heavier, and certain environments will feel misaligned. This is not arrogance, it is awareness. Growth heightens sensitivity to what drains clarity and weakens resolve. What once felt comfortable may begin to feel constraining. Choosing alignment means honoring that awareness rather than silencing it for the sake of comfort. Approval seeks affirmation in the moment, but alignment invests in long-term stability. Approval reacts, alignment responds. When choices are filtered through purpose, external opinions lose their controlling power. You no longer need constant reassurance because direction has been established internally. Confidence becomes anchored, not dependent. Choosing alignment often requires solitude. Not isolation, but intentional space to listen, reflect, and recalibrate. Noise makes approval louder, but stillness clarifies alignment. In quiet moments, motives are revealed and intentions are refined. Growth accelerates when decisions are made from clarity rather than pressure. Alignment does not eliminate relationships, it redefines them. Some connections deepen because they are rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Others naturally fade because they were sustained by convenience rather than purpose. This shift is not loss, it is refinement. When alignment leads, conclude that growth will no longer require permission and progress will no longer depend on applause. Reaction is easy because it requires no preparation. It responds to pressure, emotion, and urgency without direction. Intention, however, requires thought, discipline, and clarity. When life is lived reactively, circumstances dictate movement. When it is lived intentionally, purpose determines direction. The difference between motion and progress is intention. Many people confuse activity with advancement. Being busy feels productive, but busyness without direction leads to exhaustion, not growth. Reactivity keeps attention locked on what is immediate rather than what is important. Intentional living asks a different question, not what needs my attention right now, but what aligns with where I am going. This shift changes how time, energy, and effort are invested. Intentionality begins with clarity. Without clear priorities, everything feels urgent. Decisions become rushed, and commitments multiply without alignment. Intentional people simplify. They identify what matters most and allow that clarity to govern their choices. This does not eliminate responsibility, it orders it. When priorities are clear, distractions lose authority. Reactivity thrives on comparison. Watching others move faster, louder, or differently creates pressure to rush. Intention resists this pressure by honoring process over pace. Progress does not require speed, it requires consistency. Those who rush often skip necessary development. Those who move intentionally build foundations that sustain growth long after the excitement fades. Intentional living also requires finishing what is started. Reactivity loves beginnings because beginnings feel inspiring. Intention values completion because completion produces credibility. Unfinished work creates mental clutter and erodes confidence. Finishing builds trust with yourself. Each completed commitment reinforces discipline and strengthens resolve. Being intentional means responding thoughtfully rather than emotionally. Emotions provide information, but they should not dictate direction. Intentional responses consider long-term impact, not just immediate relief. This approach reduces regret and increases resilience. When challenges arise, intention anchors decisions in values rather than impulses. Intentionality transforms setbacks into strategy. Instead of reacting with frustration, reflection follows. Lessons are extracted, adjustments are made, and movement continues with greater clarity. This posture turns obstacles into refinement rather than disruption. Living intentionally requires patience. Results may not be immediate, and recognition may not be public. But intentional growth pounds. Small, deliberate actions accumulate into significant outcomes over time. When intention leads, progress becomes sustainable, direction becomes stable, and life moves forward with purpose rather than pressure. 2026 is not the year to be loud. It's the year to be rooted. Not the year to rush, but to be intentional. Not the year to compare, but to commit. If you focus on becoming whole, healthy, disciplined, and aligned, the results will speak for you. You won't have to announce it. You won't have to force it. You won't have to chase it. So this year, wake up with purpose. Move with intention. Finish what you start. Heal what you avoided. Build what you've been postponing. Focus on yourself in 2026. Not because you're all that, but because your future deserves your full attention.